Hello again everyone, and welcome back to Harry's Jeti Clinic. This is a video on how to control your flaps by flight modes. And if that sounds familiar, it's because this is the first of a series of remakes of videos that came out in the very early days back in 2020. And I'm going to remake a few of them because I've now got better filming. There may have been some menu updates in the software updates in the years since then. I've learnt how people use or misuse the system and things they get wrong, so we can account for that. And there may have been some technical changes. For example, the web address for Lua apps may have changed. So I'll do a series remaking some of the more important of the very early videos. So, flaps by flight mode, which I think is by far the best of many different ways that you can control the flaps. And in talking of controlling the flaps here, I mean for an aircraft that has things like landing flap, takeoff flap, and just flaps up for flying around. So we're not delving into glider type flaps with butterflies and thermal and speed trims and that kind of thing. For a great many power models these days, they come with flaps, so getting this right is good. As I say, there are many different ways to control flaps. Why should you want to do it by flight mode? Well, the big thing is that flight mode allows you to trim the elevator per flap position. So now that's trim, not mixing, which means you can, on the maiden flight, put the flaps to the takeoff position, trim to get the attitude just right, put the flaps to the landing position, use the trim to get the attitude just right, and then when you come in to land on that maiden flight, when you put the flaps down, there are no nasty pitch changes. You could even use auto trim, which means that you would not even take your fingers off the sticks. You just fly the aircraft and the clever transmitter will sort out the elevator trim for you. Cool, eh? Now, as well as doing it by flight mode, we're going to go in and use the butterfly flap menu to set the flap positions. There are other ways you can do it in flight modes, for instance by using constant curves in the functions, but the reason I love doing it in the butterfly flap menu is that once you go in there, all your flap travels for every flight mode are in there on that one screen. You can set each flap independently to the perfect setting, get all your flaps aligned with one another, all in that one screen. So that's why I choose this method of doing it. I think it's by far the best way, and once you've tried it, I think you will love it. So let's go in and have a look at the programming. I've already got a model going, and if we look in its basic properties, it's got 2 flaps, 2 ailerons. If you have a 3-flap model, the question occasionally comes up, what do you do? Well, just select a 4-flap model, and in the servo assignment with flap 4, just use it for something else. You can, reassign something over it, leave it blank, just ignore it, whatever. Doesn't matter. Function assignment. Now here's the important bit of the programming. We're going to take out the control. Seems strange, yes, the system will default to something like P5, but we are going to press clear and remove it. That might seem strange, but bear with us and we'll see what happens. Now we come on to fine tuning, and we'll go into flight modes, and we'll see what I've done there. So I've got my 3 flight modes: landing, takeoff, and default. I do find sometimes if you tell people you need 3 flight modes, what they do is they add here another 3 modes, but you don't need to. If you have 3 modes, 5 modes, whatever, just use the default as one of them. You can change its name if you want. I can't be bothered. By convention, I just add the extra modes such as land and takeoff, and I know that default is my normal fly around mode with flaps in the normal position, anything else in the normal position. But it doesn't matter if you do want to add modes, just make sure that you never switch any of them off, otherwise it will drop into default mode, which won't be set. We've set a delay. Now this is quite important because this slows down the flaps and the trim of the elevator that goes with them. You do need to set a delay on default, because if you switch from takeoff to default and there's no delay, the flaps will jump up that bit. So these delays are how long it will take to move into that flight mode when you switch to that flight mode. So of course default wants one. If you were to switch quickly from landing to default, for instance in a go around, you smack the switch up straight through takeoff to default, it won't take the accumulation of 3 seconds to move the flaps. It will just take 1.5 seconds because the transmitter sees, oh, you've switched to default, that takes 1.5 seconds, so the flaps will move much more quickly over that time. And we've set the switch that I use for each of those. So I can switch on the takeoff mode and switch on the landing mode. When they're both off, there's no other mode switched on, so default becomes the mode. So we say OK to that one. Now we come down to digital trim. Very important this. We'll go to elevator and we're going to change it from global trim to separate trim. And that's what allows the elevator trim to be a separate value in each flight mode instead of the one trim covering all modes. So we say OK to that. Then we come down to our butterfly flap menu. Now we need to put a control in. In some things, if you do not put in a control, for instance, if you go into the free mixes and you create a mixer and you do not put something in control, then it is permanently on. But in butterfly flaps, nothing in there means it's permanently off. It must have something. Do not use the switch you're using for the flaps, because that will input a value, for instance, a +100, 0, -100, which starts confusing things a bit. It'll all work, but the values will look a bit odd. So what control do we want? Well, we want a value of on. Jeti doesn't have something called on, but there is something that is on. So press the plus, choose logical switches, and either scroll down to the bottom or scroll backwards 1, which will scroll to the bottom, and there is logic max or log max. Choose that. There it is. It's put in a value of +100%, which is on. That's what we want. Say OK. Now come along to the mode and set it to flight mode separate just by pressing the programming button. That's all it takes. You can do that the other way around. You could say flight mode separate, then come along and say max, but you would encounter a little snag there. It only sets the control in the flight mode that you are in, default. And you would have to go through each flight mode, operating the switch, then change it to log max, and change again, change to log max. However, if you put the max in first, then change the flight mode, max is there across all of them already for you. Now come down to aileron flap adjustment, and here's our two flaps, servo 1 and servo 2. If you'd chosen the 4 flap option, it would be servo 1, 2, 3, 4. Please always remember that it's best in Jeti to stick to the rule that if you're standing behind the model and looking down at it, servos go from left to right. So servo 1 will be our left wing flap, servo 2 will be our right wing flap. Where the servos are assigned in the channel numbering is irrelevant to this. You could have flap 2 at a lower channel number than flap 1. If you've got multiple flap servos at 3, 4, 6, they can be at random. The channel assignments can be backwards. Doesn't matter. What matters is that name. Flap 1, flap 2, flap 3, flap 4, etc. Servo 1, 2, 3, 4 goes from left to right. So now we'll have a look at the flap setting. You go to your model, You put the switch to the flaps up position, which is default mode, and I suggest you remove symmetry by pressing the button. Symmetry just means that if I change one, they will all change. You see that? We don't want that. So switch off symmetry. At the moment, the servo will be at its mid position, which will be somewhere between fully up flap and fully down flap, sort of takeoff flappish. And if I press the programming button now or rotate it, you see servo 1 only, but not servo 2 changes. So I can look at the model and rotate the dial whichever way is necessary to put that flap into the neutral position. Just for the demonstration of this, we'll go with it took 70%. Come along to the next fast servo, look at the model, put your meters on it, whatever you're using, and dial up whatever value is necessary to put that servo in the correct position. Now, it might be the same positive or negative as the first one, but if you've got, reversed servos, etc., it might be a negative value. Don't worry about it. Just turn it to the required value. There we are. My flap's at the neutral position. Flaps are up. And that's it. Both flaps are now perfectly set for the default fly around. Switch to takeoff. Notice the value goes back to 0. And let's just say that you've put your angle meter on it or your travel meter on it, and you can go to each flap in turn and just dial in the number that gets it set perfectly. Now change to the landing mode, and once again dial in the exact value for each servo that gives you just the perfect travel. And that's it. Whether you got 2 servos, 3 servos, 4 servos, 6 servos, they are all now perfectly set. The travels are matched. That's it. Everything in one screen. Isn't that beautiful? And let's have a look now at servo monitor. There, 3 and 4 are our flap servos, I believe. Let's take a little look. There we are. Flap 1 and flap 2. So I'll press the button again. And which one's our elevator? I'll move the elevator stick. There we are. So I can move the travel values and we get that. Notice that their signs are opposite, but that doesn't matter. Remember, we dialed in exactly what the flaps wanted. See how they travel nice and slowly? We put them to the flying around position. And now let's look at the elevator. Suppose we've taken off, it's a maiden flight, and we want to trim the elevator. We find that it takes a little bit of up trim. Now you've got the model all trimmed, it's nice and level, you're ready to test the flaps. So you come round for a fly past at a safe height, you slow the model down as you would if you're starting to prepare to land, or as it would be on the takeoff. You go to takeoff flap. Notice the elevator trim disappears because you've not trimmed now in this mode. And let's say that it takes some down trim to do that. You continue around the circuit, come for another fly past, slow the model to a suitable speed, and you apply full landing flap. Notice once again the elevator trim has disappeared. Let's say that it now takes lots of up trim. So now we can see from landing, flap with landing elevator trim, takeoff flap, the takeoff trim, and back to no neutral flap with a little bit of trim. And see that the trim goes at the same speed as the flaps. So it gives you a very nice, smooth transition. And as I mentioned earlier, if we were to switch rapidly from landing to default, it won't take the cumulative amount of time through 2 flight modes. It'll just go straight to the default 1.5 seconds. There you are. And that's it. I hope that's been of use to you. As I say, it's, in my opinion, by far the best way to get your flaps set up, get your trim sorted, and have an enjoyable maiden flight. Thanks for watching.